Hi, everyone. Hi, Alan. Hi, Kelvin. Hi, everyone. You're welcome. Yeah, let's give it a few minutes so that we can have more join. Yeah, then we can begin. Yes, you can tell us about yesterday's session. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak as we wait for others to join. Aina, the link is the same. So ideally, I think if you registered on the first day, you should be able to use that to get in using the email you received. Yes, there is a WhatsApp group. I'll send you though. It's basically for the coordination between the participants. Yeah, if you need any help. Yeah. I can see, Joseph, you have your hand up.
Hello, Pal. Thank you very much. Daniel has just asked if somebody wants to at least maybe comment about yesterday's topic and the session yesterday. Okay, afternoon, everyone. Good evening. This is Joseph from Kenya, actually. Yesterday's session was very, very good, but there were a lot of us who got lost on the way, and so many things came up, actually, especially when it comes to GitHub and the CI, the automated testing procedure. And we asked if we can be at least led again briefly on the same. Otherwise, the yesterday session was so much confusing, actually, but I tried to catch up. I don't know about the rest, but from myself, I tried to catch up, and I hope today's session is going to be a little bit easier, and way forward, catching up will be easier. Otherwise, I hope we are going to enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph from Kenya, for the feedback. Yeah, actually, yesterday was just a brief hint on the CI, basically where we use Travis. So I'll be doing a recap, and then we'll also look at Travis in more detail tomorrow, and then Selenium on Friday, where we'll have also questions and answers. Today's session will not be so confusing because yesterday we talked about APIs, and then I did not explain so much about APIs. So today I'll be teaching more about APIs, and then we'll also see how to use API testing tool, which is called Postman. We chose Postman because it's one of the developers' favorites. Otherwise, thank you so much for the feedback. Joseph, hopefully you'll enjoy today's session. I can assure you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Daniel. I think we can begin now. I'd like to remind you, if you have any questions, you can send them to the Q&A section, and also we shall be giving out courses, free Udemy courses to the active participants of this bootcamp. So keep the fire going, and yeah, please ask questions and do not worry about getting lost. We shall share the videos on our YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Yes, Daniel and IG, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll be back, everyone, from yesterday's session. Hopefully it was fruitful for you all. Like Joseph has mentioned to us earlier, yes, it was a bit confusing because we're doing it practically, and also we're using Python and Django specifically for our test cases and for our product that was to be tested. But however, I'll be able to give a brief recap on that tomorrow, since we'll also be looking at Travis, the CI tool. I have seen some comments in the section, in the chat section from Joseph asking about CI, and I've also seen Aina asking about CI. Aina, you seem to be from Nigeria. Yes, we'll be looking at CI tomorrow. That's continuous integration, which we talked about briefly yesterday. As for today, we're going to be talking about APIs and Postman. I think we've hinted on this from day one, and I believe by now each and every one of us has installed Postman. Yeah, so I believe already, so we'll get started then with the APIs and Postman, but I'll give 3 minutes for any questions or any suggestions before we can get started. So if you feel like you need to say something or if you have any kind of query, you have 3 minutes, please raise your hand and then you'll be able to speak just like Joseph did.
Yes, Vincent, you can speak.
Hello.
Yes.
It is Abuya here.
Yes, Abuya.
I'm from Nairobi, Kenya.
Yes.
I've been doing self-learning in front-end technologies, HTML, CSS, some JavaScript, Bootstrap, and I've done some Git. My question is, should I continue and I do again Python and I do data structures? Oh, what is the path should I take so that I can be good with the front-end development? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abuya, for your question. I'll be answering it shortly. I see Juma has also raised his hand. So I'll take on the questions at once and I'll give you the answers as a collective.
Well, my question, it's Ronnie here from Kenya. I'm asking on, despite the live class sessions, is there anywhere else that we can access the notes so that we can go through them, maybe at our own time or pace?
Okay, good question. Paul, I think you can take that one.
Yes, Ronnie, we are sharing emails. As long as you registered, you get an email with a copy of the slides. If there are slides and if there are any links, they are added to that email. And also our YouTube will be having, we'll have the video recordings of these sessions.
But
Yes, Joseph.
okay, thank you. Had I known that there was going to be this, I would have asked the question the first time I was given the opportunity to talk. However, I just wanted some clarification maybe from Daniel when you will be doing a recap of the, I don't know if it can happen tomorrow or today. Yesterday, when you were talking about the filing structure of the test, that the file which we had yesterday forked from our GitHub to, there was a statement you made yesterday that we have to create the test file with the test with the name test somewhere, and there was a question also which came up on WhatsApp if all the files which you need to test should be created with that kind of name extension. Maybe you will just also try to clarify on that.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. I'll start with your question, Joseph, the last one about the names for the testing. So this happens for Python. Remember we talked about PyTests, which is a testing framework for Python. So when you name your file with the test underscore, then the name of your test file, when the programs are running, then PyTest is able to know that this is a test file because you've named it in that particular way, right? So if you do not name it that way, then it's going to ignore it. It's going to treat it as a normal file, like the other files we had, settings.py. Those are not testing files. So PyTest does not consider them at all. I hope that answers your question.
Sure, it does. Thanks.
All right. Then Abuya asks about front-end roles. I think you're already on the right path doing HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So there's frameworks for that to help you do better front-end. So there's Angular, there is TypeScript, React, React Native, and so many other React frameworks, JavaScript frameworks that you can use to enhance your front-end skills. They're not limited to JavaScript only, but yeah, I think you're on the right path already. You asked about continue picking up Python and Django. Python is more of a back-end language as compared to front-end, although it can be used for, if you look at Django as well, it can be used for front-end. I hope that answers your question. Do we have anything in the chat? Okay, I can see that the questions have been answered. So we'll be doing a recap tomorrow, and then we'll also look at Travis and cover roles tomorrow. So I'll be basically re-explaining the files, but I'll be a bit brief as well. So for today, we're going to, let's have our focus on APIs, which was a term that was new for so many people. Let's get started with the structure. So our agenda for today would be the API basics first. Then we'll look at what we call REST APIs, and then we'll look at Postman, which is a testing tool we're going to be using. And then we'll do a test demonstration using Postman. Then later on, we'll have questions, and I'll be giving answers together with my colleagues, Pal and Oghomwen. Okay, I think we have all heard about the term API, at least somewhere. If you haven't, then yeah, you're at the right place. We're going to talk about what an API is. I think from Monday to Tuesday, we spoke about APIs. And then if you're doing programs already, you're talking about APIs, or you've heard about APIs from your colleagues. Yeah, so you must be wondering what an API is. And from the past days, I said that an API is sort of a user interface of one system to another system. So picture how you use an application, for example. You have an interface where you're able to give some information to this system, say your username and password, and you're able to log in. You're also able to get information from this application on a user interface, right? So that is why it's called a user interface. An API is a system interface, basically, from one system to another. So the way you use an application is the way another application would use another application. So that means the interface is not the same as that of a user, but then they use what we call an API. So it's basically used to exchange different files, which we'll talk about later. But in a nutshell, it's basically a system-to-system interface. It's not a user interface per se, but we can use the analogy of a user interface to try to understand what an API is. So basically, one system is trying to use another system to do what you do to any other system. So it can ask for information, or it can give it information, or try to change the information on that other system. So system to system communication, basically. How do applications talk about each other? So an API contains basically software building tools, such as communication protocols as well, which we're going to be looking at. So if you've heard of HTTP, then yeah, that's one of the protocols we use. So it can be for a database system, it can be for an operating system, it can be for computer hardware or a web-based system. So what is the point of building APIs. So APIs basically try to make applications or software reusable. So instead of having software for, just a second. So yeah, instead of having software for that one application that does everything, you're able to have an application that does more specified roles, and then it's able to outsource some of its responsibilities to other software programs. So you simply just call or pick data from other systems. An example would be your mobile banking application that communicates to, say, your digital wallet. So to your mobile money, you're able to do, you're able to bank from let's say you're using standard bank, and then you have a digital wallet, or you want to send money from your standard bank account to your mobile money account. We notice here that these are two different systems. So one system belongs to your bank, and the other is for mobile money. So you want to shift money from one account, one system to another, basically. So how do these two systems communicate? How does it know that money has been sent and how much has been sent? So they communicate via API, and we're going to look at how that works. Any questions for now? Yes, Oni asks if he should learn all these languages. Yeah, you do not have to learn every language before testing. Testing can happen for any language, really. We're just using Python for demonstration purposes. So do not worry about the language. The languages you use are just fine. However, we had to pick one in the interest of time to make sure that we're able to at least move faster and cover as much as we can. I see a raised hand. Okay, we'll get started then. Yes, so as I just mentioned previously, we have our first application A and we have application B, and they're trying to talk to each other. Let's say application A is for your mobile banking application, and then application B is your mobile money application. So both are different. You could have a different bank, a different balance on your app A and a different balance on app B. So you want to send money from app A to app B. How does that happen? So you make a request, and then you're able to generate a response for this. So what kind of requests do we make? Let me see some ideas in the chat. I'll give it 10 seconds. Okay, I can see you're already familiar. Familiar with the kind of requests and the methods that are used. I can see post, get, delete. So I think many of you are already ahead of me, but I'll go slowly at this time. I'll agree with Ogechuku Aina, who says to purchase airtime. Yes, that's a request we make as a user. But now, how does, so you have a user interface to make that kind of request, but we're not looking at the user interface, we're looking at the system to system interface. So yes, you can still make that kind of request. So you want to buy airtime. How much airtime do you want to purchase? And you're able to feed that data. That is what we call, which request is that? Yes, that's, so you're pushing data to the system. It will give you feedback on a response on that, whether you transaction has been successful or not. And it comes along with error codes. So we have basically a lot of status codes. Yesterday we looked at some of them. We said 200 is okay, or it means success. And then we looked at 404, which means not found. And there's so many other different statuses or status codes. Yeah, so basically that is what an API is. If you have any other questions before we move on, I hope we have now understood to a certain point what an API is. Okay, if there are no questions, then we'll look briefly at the different types of APIs. So we've all used APIs in a certain way. And maybe another example I can give about APIs is the different sockets we have. So if you want to get power from a socket, the wall socket, then you have to have a plug that can fit in that socket. So what does this say? If the plug does not fit in the socket, then you're not able to access power. That's how APIs work. So they have certain standards one is supposed to follow. So if you do not follow those standards, because they work on standard protocols, then you're not able to access APIs, or you're going to find challenges trying to work with these APIs. So we have what we call the local APIs, basically, which are for the operating system. So these provide services to the application programs, just like the Zoom we're using right now. So they're able to communicate with the operating system appropriately. Then we have the program APIs, which are based on the RPC technology, of course, which is a remote procedure call. I hope many of us are familiar with that, but it's basically a software communication protocol that one program can use to request for service from a program located in another computer, which is basically on a different network. So without having to understand the network's details. And then lastly, we have the web APIs, or which we call web services, right? These ones communicate via the World Wide Web. So we have, for web services, we have mainly two. So the SOAP and REST APIs. We're going to be looking at what these are in a nutshell. I see a question in the chat. Okay, yes. I think the question has already been answered. So we'll move on to the next. So now we've looked at the types of APIs. We have local APIs, which basically for the operating system to provide services to application programs, just like the Zoom we're using and different other applications on our machines or our computers. And then we have the program APIs, which are based on the remote procedure calls. And then we have the web services or web APIs, which communicate via the World Wide Web. So our focus is going to be on the web APIs, because as a developer, these are the ones that you interact with the most, and particularly we'll be looking at REST APIs. So please stay tuned as we get into the more interesting topics of the day. Yeah, so the first one is called the Simple Object Access Protocol API, the SOAP API. So like we said, that they are a standardized way of working with APIs. So you don't just call for or make requests to another system without having to have certain standards of working, which we're going to look at in a moment. Yeah, so basically it's a standardized way of integrating web apps using XML, the WSDOS, and the UDDI open standards of an IP backbone. So it uses XML, which to mark up the data. I think if you're using some bit of HTML, if you've used JSON, there's some sort of similarity. So yes, SOAP uses XML, and of course it uses SOAP to transfer data. And then we have what we call the web services description language, as the name suggests. It's used for describing the services that are available. And then the UDDI, which it stands for Universal Description, Discovery and Integration, which is used to list the services that are available. Yes, so basically with web services, they run independent of the custom code, the source code or the source of the system, the programming languages or the operating system. So an example here is that if you have an application built with JavaScript, it can communicate to an application built in PHP, which can also communicate to an application built in Python. Then if you're running an application on Linux, it can communicate to an application on Windows via API. I remember that the end goal of APIs is basically to make applications reusable. So you do not have to build applications in one language such that they can communicate. They can simply send data to each other via API. Okay, the other type of API we have is the most common one, actually, which we should all focus on. I already saw some of the methods being posted in the chat, very interesting. So it means I have little to do here, but I'll still explain for those of us that are new to this. So please do not worry about these new terms. We're going to see them in theory and also in practice when we get to Postman. So RESTful web services are the most common. And actually, I would advise you to always try to use them over the SOAP APIs for reasons we're here to see. REST in full stands for representational state transfer, and it uses HTTP requests basically to process data. So we have methods such as GET, which provides a read-only access to a resource. So if you look at your URLs, basically, maybe if you're reading a book online, or if you're reading a certain article online, then you're going to see that there are a lot of the link is quite long. There are a lot of slashes. So basically, you're trying to get a resource from the server. Yeah, a resource can be, let's say, texts or videos, audios, and all that we'll look at in a moment. And then we also have the post, which is used to create a new resource. Basically, you're sending data to the server. Then, of course, delete is to delete or remove. And then to put is used to update an existing resource or to create a new one. So basically, look at it as putting information. These are the most common methods of HTTP. We're going to look at them in practice and see what all of them do. Then we have, REST is of course a preferred choice to SOAP because it uses less bandwidth. And of course, if you're working with web services, then you know that bandwidth matters so much. Yeah, I see one question. Someone is asking, what is SOAP in full? Thank you, Brian and Glenda, for responding. Yes, it stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. Or if you need any form of clarity, I'll be able to identify the questions and answer them. Alan is asking about the patch method. Yes, patch is also another HTTP method, but I was just highlighting the most common methods. Patch basically is a partial update. So you want to update, say you have a user who has so much information, and then you only want to update the username. So that's what you use patch for partial update. So you don't update the entire user, you just want to update, maybe you want to do a partial update certain details about this user. That's when you use patch. Thank you for that, Alan. Then I'll move on to the next topic. We're still looking at RESTful web services, which use a REST architecture. And yeah, they treat every content as a resource. So we said resources can be text files, it can be HTML pages, basically web pages. They can be images, they can be videos, or dynamic business data. Yeah, so that is it about REST APIs. Any questions before we compare the two, SOAP and REST APIs? Yes, Alan is asking if I can talk about GraphQL. Unfortunately, I will not be going into GraphQL in the interest of time, because this topic is quite broad, and I really want us to, first of all, understand what we're trying to test here and what testing basically does, such that at least you can pick yourself up from there and become excellent with testing. Then I also want us to go through the basics. So in the interest of time, I will not be looking at any other alternatives. So yes, let's proceed then. What is the difference between SOAP and REST API? So SOAP is more of a protocol and REST is an architecture style. Then SOAP can't use REST because it's a protocol, but REST can use SOAP web service because it's an architecture. And it can also use any protocol like HTTP and SOAP. Then SOAP uses services interface to expose the business logic. REST uses the URI to expose the business logic. SOAP defines standards to be strictly followed. REST doesn't. Then SOAP requires more bandwidth and resource than REST. I think we've looked at that previously. So that is what makes the REST API handy for web services. Then SOAP defines its own security. REST inherits security measures from the underlying transport because it's using HTTP. So for people who have experience with networking, then you will understand that layer of the computer. Then SOAP permits XML data only, as we saw earlier, but then REST permits you to use different data formats. So you can use plain text, you can use HTML. I had Joseph speaking about HTML. You can use XML and you can use JSON formats. So these are different data formats that you can use. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of APIs. Before I move on to the next, I'd like to take on any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Daniel. I think that is so elaborate. I just wanted maybe to ask, when we are going to do test, is the SOAP and the RESTful information necessary when we will be? Is there a way we are going to practically have got this kind of maybe the codes when doing the test itself, when now implementing?
very good question, Joseph. Yeah, so we're going to be using the same code we had yesterday. It had APIs involved. So I'll just be explaining or showing you where the API is, what sort of information is trying to. So we're going to use a user module, right? We're going to try to create users using Django admin. Then we'll try to query for these users. So basically, let's say an example I'll give is you're trying to look for me on Facebook. So how are you going to find me? Maybe you're going to search for me, and that is a request. You're looking for something particular. And then what does this do? It's going to give you a response in terms of users. We'll be querying users using ID particularly. So we'll not be using searching algorithms. So if you're looking for me using my ID, you'll be able to get the information about the user Daniel. And then from that user, we're going to see his user information. And then we're also going to be able to see how we can delete this user using the delete method, how we can use patch, like Alan suggested, to partially update information about this user, and then be able to see in real time how that changes. We'll also be able to see how we can use posts and basically create different other, make different other requests. Thank you for the question. I hope that answers. So for now, we would not really need to know SOAP for this session, but I just wanted to highlight it because we're looking at APIs, and I wanted to give some bit of information about it. Yes, I hope that answers your question, Joseph. The other two hands that are up, please feel free to unmute.
Yes, I'm answered. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fahad, you can speak.
Yes, I'm just asking about what is the difference between a REST API and a Restful API. REST and Restful API. Can you? Hello?
Yes, Fahad, good question. So there are basically no differences between REST and Restful, but remember that Restful uses a REST architecture, basically. So that is, they're very related. I do not want to complicate the session really, but there's almost no differences between them, really. So yeah, someone is asking about stateless nature. Still you, Fahad, asking about stateless nature of a REST API. Can someone in the chat answer that question? Maybe I'll give it 15 seconds. What do we mean by when we say that? Because REST uses HTTP, and that's a hint to the answer to your question. So I'd like to give it to the public. Thank you, Fahad. Okay, I see that there are no further questions, so we can dive into Postman. And we've already talked about Postman. So I just want to do a small recap on what we had on day one, where we looked at black box testing and white box testing. So Postman falls under the two. Can someone tell us in the chat whether Postman is black box or white box testing? I'll give it some 20 seconds. Elijah says white box. Elijah, could you unmute and maybe tell us why you think it's white box? Elijah, you could unmute and tell us why you think Postman is white box testing. Okay, Elijah seems to have an issue with his audio. Then maybe Edem, you can unmute and tell us why you think it's white box testing.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Postman has to do with the internal structure. So yes, white box testing does that because they only test the internal structure, design, and coding of the software.
How does it have to do with the internal structure?
Okay, for example, if you are testing authentication on Postman without having to, not doing it manually, you go on your Postman, you look for the particular API and you apply the get, post, and delete options.
Okay, thank you so much for that contribution. I'll be responding in a while, but I want to listen to one more person. Thanks so much, Edem. There's a hand that's raised. Joseph, please unmute and give us what you think.
Maybe in addition to what Edem has said, I will say that there is no access to the source code. That's why it will be included as a white box.
I think that is a wrong definition of white box testing, because with white box testing, we know the internal workings, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but with Postman, we do not know the internal workings. And actually, there's a particular reason why I would recommend Postman, because you're able to generate the API code in any language of your choice. And we'll see that in a moment. But yes, like Crispus has said, API in Postman, you do not know the internal workings. So it will be some form, so you don't know the internal workings, you're just testing the API. Thank you for the response. Yes, so the answer to that question is that we do not know the internal workings, like Crispus has said. And so Postman is black box testing and not white box, because you do not know the internal workings. So what we did previously, yesterday, was white box testing, because you remember we could look at the code, we could manipulate it to allow some tests to pass and make others fail. So we did that intentionally because we had the workings. Now, when you're using Postman, you're just doing, using mockup data. Let's say data about a user, and then you're trying to see whether it passes or not. So you're not going into the internal workings. So it becomes a black box testing. I hope that is clear for everyone, but if you need a further explanation, then we'll look at that practically. Yes, so what is Postman? And we've talked about it from day one, it's now day 3. Postman is basically an API testing tool that was designed in 2012, basically to make API development and testing very straightforward. So it can be used to design, document, verify, and change APIs. So it has a feature of sending and observing the HTTP requests and responses. So you're able to see different things. And you're also able to access files in different formats, and you're able to access the different methods that we've looked at, such as get, post, patch, delete. And we're going to do this practically. So if the theory is confusing and you're a more practical person, yeah, so be it. We are going to have a look at that. So it has a graphical user interface as well, and can be used platforms like Linux, Windows, and Mac. So if you're not able to install Postman on your machine, you can find the web version. So you can just create an account online and then be able to do your testing for API. And yeah, so I would advise you to, there's a Google Chrome extension for Postman, but I would not advise you to use that. Please, if you cannot install it, make sure you use the web version at least. It's more reliable. So what are some of the advantages of using Postman? So yeah, it can be used for test development by addition of checkpoints to the HTTP response codes and the other different parameters we're going to look at. So it can also be integrated with the continuous integration and the CI/CD pipeline, basically, as we talked about it. It can be integrated with Newman or collection runner, which allows executing of tests in much iteration, such that we don't repeat our tests. So another reason is because Postman has a big community. You'd also find that a lot of people use Postman, so there's some bit of uniformity when you know how to use Postman. You don't find challenges. Then it also allows you to be able to debug, which is also very okay. And remember, it can build for you code in any language you're comfortable in, basically the API code. So we're going to look at that, worry not. Yeah, so you can create more than one environment with Postman. So I'll be sharing that in a few. Then you can import or export different environments. Other advantages is that it comes without any licensing costs. So it uses a freemium model, basically. So, which is very easy to use. You can just also download it and then install it on your machine, be able to run tests on Postman. Alternatively, you can use a web version if you do not have, if you're not able to install it locally on your. So another point to note, maybe before we move forward, is that Postman does not run unit tests. It only runs integration tests because unit tests or unit functions are not available nor accessible to the user via API. So remember, we're doing black box testing. We're not having internal workings. So yesterday we were able to look at unit tests and integration tests. So Postman will look at integration tests only. Then with Postman able to test different things. But for now, those are the advantages of using Postman. So I will be going to the practical sessions now. Just give me a second to stop sharing my screen and to then.
If you have any questions, this is the time to ask. For those who are participating, thank you. But yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I'm going to share the links for to join Tunga and our YouTube channel. Yes, and I'm also reminding you that those who are active will be able to select a course on Udemy. We shall be giving out courses on Udemy, a course for 2 of our most active developers on this call during the webinar, and all of you will be able to get certificates for participating in all the 5 days of the webinar. Yeah, please ask your questions now if you have any.
I'm just running the server. I'm giving it some time to get started, so we're able to see. So this is the default Django REST API interface that you see here. I think you can see that we have, this is a GET request. We can see that there's a status code here, 200, which means okay. Then we can see the different content types, and then we can see the request that is being made, right? Then the other methods that we talked about, such as get posts are available. So here you can see that you're able to create information. Maybe you can create a new user by just filling in the name. And then once you're done, then what you're doing is going to be called a post, because you're trying to push information to that database. So for posts, you're trying to create a new record. And then we've also seen we're getting information about a particular user. So what you see on the URL up there where my cursor is, I'm trying to get user slash, I'm trying to get a user from users, but with ID 1. So as you can see down here, there's an ID for the user, basically for the admin. So the ID is 1, and I'm querying that user. So you can also look for another user, maybe user 3. But now you see that we haven't created a user with the ID 3, so it's going to tell you that this is not found. And now you can see the error code has changed to 404. And all these status codes have particular meaning. So the previous one was 200, it said okay. This one is 404, it says not found. So there's no record. We're going to create some records, and then we're going to be able to query them. If you can look up there, then you can see the delete option. Yeah, so that's also one of the functions that we have. So basically what you're looking at is Django REST framework, but it does the same thing as Postman. We're going to see how to do that in a nutshell. So you're able to put and patch. Patch, remember, is partial update. So if you want to update certain information about that user, then you're able to update it. So what you see on your screen is the Django admin. Again, you do not have to worry about this if you're using a different framework. So what I'm basically going to do is to log in, and I just want to create maybe certain users, and then I'll be able to show you what is happening in the background. So currently, as you see from the Django admin, we only have one user, and that happens to be the admin. So when we try to query for user with ID 3, the status that was returned was not found, 404. So now let's try to create another user. So if I search for a user with, so now you can see the information about the admin. So the full name, the password, last login, first name, last name, the username, the email, and the other details. So now we're going to create another user, then we'll be able to use them. For the Python or Django users, always try so much not to delete the admin, otherwise you're going to find challenges with that. That will give you a headache. So we'll try to create another user, we'll put a password. You can ignore the others, and we'll put a first name. If you're running Django, then this comes automatically. There's nothing new that I have created. So if you fork the project from GitHub, then you also have this already. So we're creating our user. The first name is test, last name is test. And now you can see that we have 2 users. And if you go back to the browser and try to make a GET request to fetch all the users, then now you see that we have another user with ID 4. And that is a test we've just created right now. Then we'll create one more user who we're going to delete and use for partial updates. So I'll be calling user delete. So that I hope this is not confusing, because we are simply creating users on the Django admin. So if you remember what we did when we were creating Mockup data on the factories file in Python, this is the same thing we're doing. We're just creating dummy data because we do not have actual users for this system yet, but we're trying to emulate actual users in the field. So you can see that the user delete was successfully added. So what we're doing is creating Mockup test data, and we're going to use this data to basically run our tests. So when we check for the users again, you won't be able to see that now we have our user delete here. So we can make a GET request to query only our user delete. So now we're doing a retrieve request. So GET will give us everything, retrieve will give us specific user. So before we had every user, and now we're retrieving particular data, so based on ID. So the name of our the ID of our user is ID 5, and then we can see the different information about the user. So down here, you're also able to see the data in raw format, or what we call JSON, and you're able to also see it in HTML format. So we can change the full name for this user to delete user. So if you can see currently, the username is, the full name is, there's no full name actually, so I didn't put a full name. So now we want to update that, only the full name. We don't update the password, we don't update the email, only the full name. So one thing to note here is you do not have to put a comma at the end. So if you put a comma at the end, you're going to get an issue. So let me just show you. That error means it's expecting more properties, right? So if you look down, then you're going to see that the last doesn't have a comma at all. So that's what you have to do. So I'll just remove them since we only want to update the full name. So currently we do not have a full name, so we're changing it to delete user using the patch. Alan, I hope you're now with us, because you had raised a question on this. Okay, you can see that now our full name has changed from being empty to delete user. So what we've done there is we've used the patch, and the status is 200, which means we've been successful. So you can always do more research on the status, the different status codes of HTTP. So as you look down there, we also have the patch. So we're going to do the put. Next to the patch, there's a button called put. So put, basically we update everything about this particular user. I think Alan had already mentioned this. So yeah, you can see that everything about the user has been updated. The email has been changed. I added a 2. The username, the full name has changed. And then the first name, you can see that it's delete user patch update. So that's what put does. We try to update everything. So there are different methods. And now we're going to delete this user. So that's another request that we make. So there's a button there for delete. Then ask your issue you want to delete. And then yes, we've deleted. So when we go back to the users, as you can see, the status code is 204 now. It says no content found. So when we check for users in Django admin, you're going to see that we only have 2 users now, test and admin. And even if we check the REST framework, then you're able to see that now we only have 2 users, right? So initially we had our user delete, who now we've performed certain functions on this user. So we've been able to delete this user. And I think clearly now we can see that this is some bit of white box, black box testing, because I would not have any internal workings, basically. So we're only manipulating the data, right? We're trying to retrieve information, get data, we're deleting, or doing patches or partial updates, we're putting data where we basically update everything about this user. So If you look up there, then you're going to see most of the things that we have done. We've done get, put, patch, delete, and yeah, basically that is what we have done at the moment. So if you looked at the button options, so it highlights all parameters that are required, basically information about all these parameters. So if you look at, let's say, then the full name or so the ID, is it read only? Is it an integer? What type is it basically? Is it read only? Is it required? You can always change this. What's the label? So you look at full name, what type is it? It's a string. Is it read only? Is it required? Basically, what's the label? What's the max length? So that's what options gives you. So now we're going to go straight to Postman, where we're going to be doing the same exact things. So for those using Python, since we're already in Python, I just wanted to show this. But if you've been following, then we're just going to be doing the same exact things with Postman. I'll then start by explaining the Postman interface, and then we're going to be doing the same things with Postman. So remember that you have to download and install Postman, create an account, and then create a workspace, which we can use then to run these API tests. So if you haven't installed it yet, no worries, you can use the web version. So now I'll move to the Postman. So I already have Postman installed. So this is how it looks like. This is how the interface looks like. It's much more detailed compared to the Django REST framework one, but ideally everything is the same. Now Postman can do so much, but I'm going to give you basically a crash course on this and how to use it much better. So I'll be looking at history and mainly collections. If you look on your left, on the left of the screen, so you can see the history of what we have done, the GET requests we've made, the posts, those delete somewhere. So history gives you a history of basically the requests that you have made. So, and show you that we've done a patch, a delete, and all that. And then we have also the collections. So what you see up there are collections, basically the different requests we have made or things that we've worked on. So I will now get started on how to use this. Remember, it is web-based, right? So if you look into the search bar, then you're going to see that we have a link. So because this is installed on my machine, we're now, you can see that this is copy pasted from my local host. So 127.0.0.1 comes from the local host. Right there. I hope you can see this from my terminal. So that's the link we're using. I'll just copy it. So you paste it there such that you're able to access the services. Oh, okay, we're making now a GET request. Yeah, so when we make the GET requests, we're able to see the same exact things we saw in Django REST framework. So you're able to see the users. So we had 2 users, and you can see them now, same as we saw them before. So this information is basically using JSON. JSON, remember, we say that REST API can use any format of data, text-based files, XML, and JSON. As you can see, the different options are there, right? So it can also use HTML. Yeah, we highlighted on that. So, but for now, our data is in JSON. The difference is really small. So now we'll go to the different parameters. So we have params, we have authorization. So remember, I logged in and the Django admin using my admin, the user which I told the people that use Django not to delete. Very importantly, we shouldn't delete the admin. So I'm able to log in. Then we have headers. We have the body itself. And the body, you can choose what format you want. You can choose JSON, HTML, XML. It's up to you, really. Yeah, so those are the main things we look at. Do not mind about these others. So remember, I mentioned to you that the reason why I like to use Postman is because it is able to generate for you code in any language of your preference. So since now we're using Python, I've chosen Python, but I know we have so many C# developers. That's how it would look like. The API code, basically. I had someone who's using Java. So that is how it would look like for you. Which other language? C, Node.js. Yeah, so basically you can see the code varies. Then there's PHP, of course. That's how it would look like. And this is why I like to use Postman so much. It's one of my preferred testing tools. So now, now that we've seen a bit of the Postman interface, are there any questions before I can proceed? Because now I'd like for us to replicate what we did in Django REST framework user interface. So I just want us to do the delete here. I want us to do the posts. I want us to do the updates and all these other things. So if you have any questions, I'll give maybe a minute or 2 and then we can drop them in the chat. And then I'll be able to answer them. I see a question. How is the generated code useful? That comes from Joseph Ayoma, who comes from Kenya. So when you ask to test for maybe a certain API, this code is useful for you so you're able to just copy and paste it in your own work. So remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel now by writing this code by yourself. You could make mistakes, and even if you do not make mistakes, it's going to consume certain amount of time. So for me, who uses Python, I'll just come and copy this, and then that's it, I'm done. Then I can go to my code and then paste it. Simple as that. It runs properly, no warnings, no errors, as you can see. Yeah, so that would be the advantage. Otherwise, you have to do it from scratch. But if you prefer to do it from scratch, well and good. It can, provided you get the end result right. But that is, for me, I prefer to use the Postman because it's very accurate. Any other questions before we proceed?
Daniel, there's a question that was earlier. Elijah asks, can this action, that is the get, post, etc. be tracked so as to know who is testing or working on the APIs? Are there tools? He's asking for audit purposes.
Good question, yeah. So Postman is actually cloud-based, right? So if you look at where my cursor is on the screen right now, you're able to see that all the data in the workspace is backed up on servers. And remember, you cannot. There are different people working on this same. So you're able to invite people to the workspace, and you'll be able to know who was doing what. So yeah, it's cloud-based, so you're able to know. I hope that answers your question.
There's another question from Fahad. He says, since we are doing REST APIs, won't it be better we get XML and JSON formats?
Yes, good question. We can use, of course, we can always use both, but because of Django REST framework, it uses JSON only. So that's why you see that our data is in JSON. Okay, Elijah, your question is answered. Yes, Paul.
There is someone who raised a hand. Please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, my name is I know, yeah. Well done, Daniel. Yeah, thanks. I really, in fact, this API just made me like, you know, when your mind is so far away, and then just brought my mind back. Like, it's been a nice day today. Like yesterday, it was like we're driving on a rough road. Thanks anyway. Yeah, my question is where what are the organizations that use this Postman, and where do we apply it? Is it, I don't know, because for me, I'm not really familiar with it because I'm coming into tech and I'm not so familiar with it. Hello?
Okay, thank you so much for your comments and the compliments. So Postman really is used by different organizations. Remember, the purpose is for API testing. So provided you're doing API testing, you should use Postman. It's not mandatory, of course, but you can always test even if you're using cloud platforms like Salesforce, you're able to test on them. Google and Amazon, this kind of companies also use Postman to test their APIs. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's okay, fine, it's fine.
Right. Joseph says he used it some time back to test for mobile money transfer integration with the system. Maybe Joseph, you can unmute and tell us how that went, such that I will also get a different perspective. Yes, Joseph.
Sorry, Daniel, for that. I was wondering if we can test the application, my test we did yesterday. We forked yesterday using the Postman. And again, I was just saying that sometimes I tried to use the Postman actually to test mobile money transfer. Here in Kenya, we call it M-Pesa. I think the Kenyans here knows very well how it works. So we were integrating this system, but we had to test the M-Pesa API, that is a mobile money transfer application provided by Safaricom with another system. So before the fully integration, we had to test the system if it works fully on Postman, and that was the last time I used it. Actually, I've never used it again before. So it is useful. I just wanted to maybe put more on its usefulness. So there are companies which use Postman, especially those which provides API to integrate with their system, like even, for example, the banking companies. So it is used. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Yes, I think you've elaborated further with a real world example, and the Kenyans in the building can relate to M-Pesa. But basically, M-Pesa is just mobile money for Kenya. So if you're using Airtel Money or MTN, Momo, then it's basically the same thing for you. If you're in Uganda or anywhere else that uses mobile money. Thank you so much, Joseph, for the submission. And about your question concerning my test, yes, this is the my test application that you forked from the GitHub that we're testing now. We're testing for the users, and we're trying to basically run different things on them. And actually, that is the next thing I wanted us to look at. If there's no other question, then I will be proceeding to
maybe.
Yes, Joseph.
Maybe before the mic is taken away from me, I was just asking if there is a way in which we can test it direct from the GitHub, because from what I can see, you are doing it from your local machine. Maybe you can just clarify about that. Sorry for that anyway.
Yes, so yes, I'm testing it locally now, but to run it on the, to test the one on the GitHub, we'll have to run it on a server, right? Like Nginx or Apache. That's what we're able to test that version. Is that what you're trying to say, Joseph?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get clarification on, how we can go about it directly from the GitHub.
Yeah, so this currently is running locally, and also when you fork it or when you clone it or download it, you'll be able to run it locally. But then you have to run it on the server first, like maybe Apache or Nginx, and then you're able to test it now.
Okay, that's
all right.
That's clarified. Okay.
Okay, another thing we can do maybe is to deploy this on Heroku, but I'm afraid I'll be introducing so many new things. So, but if you push this on Heroku, then you're able to test it. So Paul has shared the GitHub repo link in the chat. For those that were not here, I understand there's so many new people here today. So you can be able to access the project we're testing right now. And then the videos also will be available on the YouTube channel. So for now, I want us to replicate what we did on Django REST framework. And I can see all questions have been answered. So the first thing we're going to do is the get request, right? So right now we have, you can see the URL, and we're making a request for users. So remember, get users URIs. So it has been able to retrieve the users. That's a get request. So it gives you the user's ID, the full name, password. Of course, the passwords are encrypted for security purposes. You can see that status code of, there's the description there that this is a standard response for successful HTTP requests, right? So 200, I think we've been seeing 200 there, and Postman really tries to make this very straightforward for you. So in a GET request, the response will contain an entity corresponding to the requested resource. So in a POST request, the response will contain an entity describing or containing the result of the action. So yeah, that's just trying to explain the status clearly for us. We're able to see the duration, the time taken in milliseconds, of course, because this is very fast. Then we're able to see the different things. I will not go into the TCP, DNS, all that networking stuff. Yeah. So basically that is the test. We can see the different authorizations available. So for now, I'm using basic auth, but some of you may have heard of what we call OAuth, no auth. So the bearer tokens as well. So yeah, you can use any of these. There's also AWS signatures. That's how they look like, and those are the details you'd have to fill. So yeah, but for now we're using the basic auth. Basic auth basically entails it contains the username and the password. So for our user admin, which you can see below with ID 1, please never delete that user if you do not want to have a headache. So we'll move to headers now. We do not have, yes, so we can see the different headers are available for us. Yeah, then just a second. Yes, so these headers are, of course, auto-generated, so you do not have to worry about them at the moment. Then you're also able to see the body, whether you want it raw in JSON or in any other format, you're able to see that. I think we have looked at that. So for now, our body is empty because it's a GET request, right? So we'll look later on and see that how the body will look like for the posts, maybe. Now, remember in our code, we had set up the post requests to fail with 4 or 5. I'm just going to show you where that is before we run it. Yes, so create is a function for the post method in Python. So we said that once someone tries to to make a post request, then we'll raise the error, method not allowed. So let's see how that works when we try to submit this information. So we make that request, and then we see that we get the error, method not allowed. So it is, we set this up for failure, and now we can, of course, edit what it will say. So we can call this maybe dead end. And then we'll save that, of course. So we're just waiting for the server to reload, because if it doesn't, then, okay, now we can see that we have dead end here. So we set up that yesterday, and then there's a small description here that a request was made of a resource using a request method not supported by that resource. So for example, using get on a form which requires data to be presented via post. So basically just explaining what the 405 status code stands for, and it's a method not allowed. So post is a method just like get. So post is not allowed. So I'm just going to give you a recap, a brief recap on the test case that failed yesterday. I think you can already see it. So here we can see that this is, first of all, this is white box testing because now we're in the internal workings. And we have our user trying to submit a post request. So I'm just going to run that and see that we still get this same error, even with our local tests. So let's just give it some time to run. So we can see that it passed here because we set it to 405. But if we change the status code to any other code, then it will fail. So let's just try to change that and see how that works. So we'll just rerun the tests. Now you can see that it has failed because the status code is not 405. So you can see the error that it's expecting 405, but it has received a status code 400. So that's why it's raising that kind of error for the status code. So this here is white box testing because we have the internal workings of the code. But now with Postman, where it's black box testing, we're going to see that the same thing has happened with Postman, and we're getting error 405. So we'll just send the request, and now we see that it's not allowed, right? Yeah, so that is post method, how it works, basically trying to push data, but now we'll set it to fail. So we're now looking at the retrieve. Remember that retrieve picks maybe one user and not all users. So we're going to specify the request that we want. So we want user one. This is with Django REST framework. You can see that of the 2 users, only the user one has come. User with ID 1, that's admin. So when we request for user 1 here, we should be able to get the same information, still with ID 1. Yeah, so I was just checking the chat for some concerns. I see that Elijah had a question, but Joseph has already responded. Thank you, Joseph. I hope that works for you, Elijah. Yeah, so this is a retrieve method. We've been able to retrieve a specific user, but we can also still get user 2. You simply remove the ID, and put ID of the ID is 4. So you put /4. And we're able to get this user. So that is a retrieve method. And the status is, of course, is there, the time taken, and of course, size of the files. So if we look for, if we try to get a user who doesn't exist, let's see what error we get. Yep, so we get not found, the error is 404. There's a brief description. Postman always gives you that the requested resource could not be found, but may be available again in the future. So that's what 404 stands for. And so far we've looked at get, post, and retrieve. So the next we're going to look at is a put method. I'll give 10 seconds. Okay, let me give 20 for someone to tell us what the put method does. Okay, Elijah, thank you. Yeah, so with put, we want to update all the parameters of this particular user. And remember, we're using, yes, Joseph, we update all the information. And remember, we're using JSON for now. So let's get started. This is how the body looks like. Remember, with the get, we didn't have a body because it was a get request. But now we have a body because we're using the put, and we're trying to basically update all the information like Joseph has told us. So if you do not want to use JSON, you can put all these parameters in params, as you can see up here. However, you have to give a key value for a key and value. A description is optional. Yeah, so let me just give an example. So we have full name, we give the value admin. We have the ID. Then first last login. Now, alternatively, you could just change this from JSON, but now we're trying to use params because I think we've looked at JSON from white box testing and up until now. So if you have noticed that when you try to add when you add these parameters, then our URL here changes. It automatically adds them. So you can see the full name. You can see the last login as well. So let's add one more and we'll see how that works. Yeah, so we can see also the super user has been updated. So that is how params works. If you do not want to use JSON, I think Elijah, that was your question. So the difference for now then is that params allows you to have to make get requests. Remember, get uses the URLs or URIs. So as you can see them there. But usually the put method has a body, and then we're able to update it in JSON like this. So let's just update it and then we'll run it. Okay, so now let us send our requests and then we see the changes. Okay, the user already exists. We didn't change certain things. Just a second. So I think we had forgotten to change the username. Not we, but I. I had forgotten to change the username and ID. So when we send now, it should be able to update. So when we look at the details of this user with ID 4, we can see that the changes have been implemented. So that is basically how the put method would work. So Alan had talked about the patch method. We looked at the patch method yesterday, and this is how it looks like in the api.py file. So we've also seen the retrieve, the update. So after that, we'll also look at the delete later on. So patch basically is to run a partial update. So put, we have updated everything about the user, but for patch, we're going to update let's just update one thing and see how that works. So remember with put, we got an error when we forgot to update the username and password. But this time we're only going to change the first name of this user. So let's call it software testing bootcamp. Okay, remember, do not put the comma at the end because it's only one and this is the last one. So when we change the first name, when we check the first name of this user, we've now changed it to software testing bootcamp. Yeah, so that is how the patch works, which is a partial update. So when we go into the code, so what you see now is the code for the patch. If you want it, it already generates it for you. Remember, you can choose any language you want right there on the drop-down menu. So there's so many languages that we all use different languages. So whichever you're working with, you're able to copy the code and then take it to the method. So you can just add that code. Yes, Joseph, that is automatically generated for you, so you do not have to go through. That basically is a patch method. And lastly, we shall delete this user, and that will bring us to the end of our session. So for delete, the method for Python is destroy. Again, you do not have to worry about this. So yeah. So we now want to delete our user with the ID 4. So when you look at the body is also empty because this is a GET request. So let us send and see what happens. Okay, we'll receive the error status or the status code 204, which says no content. The server successfully processed the request, but is not returning any content. still shows you the time taken and the size. So that's the same thing we did here for the delete. And now when we run this again, when we refresh, we see that our user has also disappeared from the Django admin. We have done this from Postman and it has affected our Django admin here. So we only have one user who I always fear to delete. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of API testing with Postman. And now the floor is open to you. I hand over the microphone then. Over to you, Pa.
Thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed this session. I know many got lost yesterday, but I think today has been a lot better. Please, if you still have any questions, do ask the questions and we'll have them answered. But thank you so much, Daniel. Yes, and so thank you for the active participation. Thank you for being here. Yes. Please ask any questions that you have before we go off. Yes, I can see your comments about it being less confusing. Yes. Thank you for being here. The videos, we shall post them at the end of the bootcamp. Would like to make a few edits. That's why we're not posting them immediately, but please bear with us. The bootcamp, we shall be posting all the videos for the entire bootcamp. Yes, the slides for today will be shared. Yes, I can see Abuya has a question. I missed the part of connecting Postman with Visual Studio, with Visual Code. Daniel, could you take
Thank
that?
you, Abuya, for that question. But ideally, we do not connect Postman to Visual Studio. What basically happens is, remember, we have these methods running in our code, as I was showing you earlier on. Just give me a second. So you can just copy, Postman generates the code for you for these different methods, such as the delete method, the post, and get. So you're able to just copy this code, and then you're able to paste this in your Visual Studio code. So there's no connection really, but it automatically generates for you this code. I think this was also a question that was raised by Joseph. Yeah, so that is how it is.
Yes, so Brian says, I'm really curious about Selenium, waiting on it.
Yes, Fahad, very good question. Can you access Django admin in the terminal? Definitely, you can access this from the terminal. Let me just demonstrate it in a second. I see we have only 8 minutes left. But in the terminal, you're going to be using the command Python, depending on the version you're running, manage.py run server. So now you can see that there's a mytest.settings. Remember the settings.py file, it's being read at the moment, and your Django is being deployed on your local host. As you can see, the link is right there. So you just copy that and you're able to paste it on your browser, and then everything should run smoothly. Yeah, there you go. I hope that answers your question, Fahad. Any other questions?
I guess there are no other questions. If that is all, I guess we can close the webinar early. Oh, Abuya has a question. It says, what about connecting to database?
Yeah, we connect to the database, remember, from the settings file. Yeah, let me just scroll a bit. So yeah, this is where you put the configurations for the database. Remember, I prefer to use SQLite because it's a default for Django. And I didn't want to configure to what I'm comfortable with, also because we're going to clone or fork the code. So for purposes of uniformity, I decided to use SQLite, but yeah, in the settings file is where you connect to your database.
Oh, I can see a hand. Please unmute and speak. Aina.
Yeah, Daniel, sorry to take you back. Sorry, I make use of visual code for my Python, HTML work. So like you were running the testing yesterday. Sorry, I didn't know, I didn't get how you got to this Django, or what's it called? I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. I'm only familiar with Sublime and visual code. How do I go about that? Hello?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So for the Django, you also have to install it, right? So the VS Code is just a text editor. You could use any, but for Django, you have to install it. You simply go to the installation site. If you have the slides for day one, you're able to access it, or you could use the package manager pip to install Django. The command is just as you see it on the screen. So now what we're doing is installing Django. So pip3 install Django. You're able to install Django and access all of this we're doing. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thanks, yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions? I don't think so. If that is all, special thanks to you, Daniel, for all the knowledge you have imparted. Then thanks to you all for the active participation. And yeah, I know some people are not bold enough to ask the questions. So those who have asked, thank you for the questions. Yes,
maybe they can use the WhatsApp group for further discussion as well.
Yes. Let me post a link for the WhatsApp group such that those would like to have any more questions that you can ask anyone else who has been here in the bootcamp. You can be able to do that. That is the link for the WhatsApp group. Otherwise, I think we are going to call it a day. Thank you once again, Daniel. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.